All right, welcome everyone. We are starting just a few minutes later than scheduled. Much apologies for that. Welcome to the Math Power panel, which is being organized as part of the mEducation Alliance Symposium 2021. My name is Mich-Seth Owusu. I work with the African Union, and I'm happy to be your moderator today. I think we will all agree in one way or the other that when it comes to interest in particularly a subject like mathematics, it is some sort of a challenge, both in developed countries as well as in developing countries. And we understand that there is that correlation between the interest and the performance. So we have a lot of challenges to deal with in terms of trying to improve teaching and learning of mathematics, and also seeing this as a very important pathway for developing countries to really participate in industrialization, whether it's the fifth or fourth industrial revolution, as we call it. And this is what brings us here today, to try to understand how this expert panel we have on can help us to understand some of the issues and to also share what they are doing. So without much ado, I'm going to start by introducing our panelists. We have here with us Wright, who is the founder. He's a founder and a math educator as well. And he works with the organization Early Family Math. We also have Brent Hutcheson. Forgive me if I mispronounce any of the names, who is the Director for Care for Education. And then we have Junaid Mubeen, Director of Education at Whizz Education. We are still expecting, oh, I see Christine is already on the call with us. Christine is also with us here, who works with the INNODEMS Kenya, and they have an initiative called African Mathematics Initiative. And she's also going to be sharing some insights as well with regards to that work that she's doing. So with that out of the way, I will ask that we go straight into the discussions. But before we start, I would like you, the audience, to know that there is a room for you to also share your inputs at the latter part of this meeting. So kindly take down any notes in terms of questions you may have for our panelists, or maybe comments that may pop up as we have these discussions. And then they'll be happy to also share their insights in that regard. And I will go straight to Chris. Chris, to start with you, could you share a little about some of the initiatives that have been implemented by Early Family Math in terms of the kind of resources that you offer and how you see them as being effective for teaching math? And in addition to that, probably you could help us to understand how you are trying to change the relationship of not just children, but families as well, and how they relate with math. How are you trying to change that relationship, Chris? Over to you. I think you're on mute, Chris.
How's that?
Yeah, great.
By way of introducing my program, I wanted to describe a situation We are all aware of a much too frequent tragedy. A child shows up for their first day of school with almost no prior exposure to reading or math. They have lost some of their most potent learning years that way. As Eric Deering of Stanford Dream pointed out yesterday, the math side of very early education, education for ages 0 to 5, is many years behind the reading side. A lot of organizations are working on improving the reading side of early education. Very few are working on the math side, which is why I founded Early Family Math. To improve early math education, families need to be involved. Getting families involved and keeping them involved is hard. I've written 3 books to help adults teach their children math, and most of those thousands of books are sitting unread on shelves. Families need community connections to make this work. Early math education should be done together with early reading education, both of which need social glue to be successful. As several presenters have pointed out during this symposium, families have many unfortunate attitudes towards math. Many leave math to the schools, many hate math, many feel anxious doing math, many are very busy and have no time for math with their children. Most are afraid they will be expected to teach math to their children. Math is seen as something done by a child alone on worksheets or on an electronic device. Early family math seeks to change the relationship of families with math, just as you were asking about. We make it fun, easy to do, and part of playtime with their kids. If adults feel confident and have fun with math, that attitude will transfer to their children. We have 60 free storybooks from African Storybook that we have annotated on each page with guiding questions and commentaries to help adults get in the habit of talking with their children about the math that is around them all the time. And that habit is essential. You asked about what's the role of parents and why are families important? And surrounding a child with seeing the math that's going on in their adults' heads all the time is essential and makes all the difference if the adults just learn to verbalize what they're already doing. So those storybooks help adults develop that habit. We also have 160 free educationally sequenced games, puzzles, activities, and investigations that families enjoy doing together. These activities are designed to use almost no resources, so they are perfect for low resource settings. There's one more thing. I'm a mathematician. I want children to learn real mathematics. Too many math education programs have children doing routine math drills. By focusing solely on mechanics and math facts, these programs miss the beauty and essence of math. Early family math activities have a lot of built-in problem solving and explorations of interesting mathematical relationships. We know that just handing adults activities and annotated storybooks is not enough. Early family math is looking to collaborate with reading literacy organizations to create community-supported, well-rounded early education programs for families to use with their very young children.
All right, thanks so much, Chris. It's really interesting, especially when you talk about the role of guardians, parents in teaching math and in learning math. Especially during this pandemic, we've had parents playing even a more pivotal role in their children's education, because now they have their children at home with them. Can you probably talk about a little bit more, probably what you found out during this time, or how you have been working even during this time to strengthen that role that parents have to play in teaching and learning of math?
Well, I think a very important thing is that they shouldn't be afraid to help with math, especially during the years that I'm talking about. They need to be able to count to 20. They need to be able to do single digit addition and subtraction. They need to be able to sort laundry. They need to be able to talk about characteristics of things and look for patterns. They're not expected to teach somebody to do multi-digit multiplication. It's a long multiplication or division. The tasks that they need to be introducing their child to during these years are very easy things. They're well equipped to do that. So I think a key thing is that they just develop the habit of talking about mathematical things, and that they not be afraid of it, and they don't show that they hate it or dislike it or whatever attitudes they're bringing into it. And I think the other thing is to take up these games that we give them to use them as fun things to do, not as something they do for 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day, but something that their family looks forward to playing together.
Right. Thanks so much, Chris. That is so interesting to hear, and also something that I'm sure most of us are thinking about in terms of those of us who may be parents, which role we are going to play. But to move on to Brent, Brent, you have this 6 bricks concept. It was interesting when I read about this, that is designed to excite and motivate young children in the classroom to attain skills in numeracy as well as also literacy. It would be great, Brent, if you could share more about this concept and how you've been applying this. And probably you can talk more about the kind of support which you are also providing as part of this concept. So I understand it's not just the 6 bricks on its own. You also have this support package that goes with it to make it work. Could you talk more about that?
Yes, thank you. And welcome everybody. 6 bricks essentially was an attempt to find a manipulative that we could put in the hands of children when they're sitting in a classroom so that they can engage with the lesson, engage with the teacher. And in a context like South Africa, where we had very large classrooms, where we had between 50 and 70 children sitting in a classroom, we needed to find some type of tool that every single child could have. And they all needed to have exactly the same. So we needed to simplify it. So we looked for something that we could give every single child. And we worked out that 6 bricks was adequate and just what we needed. And with just those 6 bricks, we could do numeracy, literacy, perceptual development, social emotional exercises, pretty much what Chris was saying in terms of playing with ideas and concepts and letting children engage with those ideas and concepts and to explore all the funny patterns and exciting ideas and use their imagination. And so we developed this idea, one, because it's based on building outside of the range of vision. So we needed to build outside the range of vision. So we had to use the Duplo brick. So it's a slightly larger brick that got you outside your range of vision, got children to work in the space outside of their comfort zone. So that means we engaged them in bilateral integration, crossing the midline, activities that were essential to building the spatial awareness that's needed for mathematics and for language development. And so we came up with a very simple concept. We could put this into the hands of children very quickly and very easily. It didn't have to leave the desk. So if teachers wanted to leave it on the desk, they could leave it there permanently. So we'd have a tool that they could grab at arm's length and use for any activity in the classroom. And that would be integrated into any curriculum in the world. So it wasn't specific to a curriculum or a learning style or a learning pedagogy. And we made this free. So we developed a tool that we wanted to be open source and free for the world. We didn't want children who were struggling to have to pay. We wanted them to be able to freely access this. And so we've put all the material freely available on websites, on our website, but in lots of websites around the world. So we've got different partners hosting the content. So we have content that can be used mainly by practitioners or teachers, but also by parents. I mean, we have a whole section for parents. And so essentially you could have the bricks on your table at your dinner table, and you could engage in exercises in the evening. So you could get parents to engage with their children on all the work that they do at school, but also for teachers to very specifically construct specific exercises that children might participate in. And we have maths and all the other materials that you would see with normal kits that you would see in classrooms around the world. And I think that it's just a very, very simple idea that is gaining a lot of traction. And I would imagine it's gaining traction because of the simplicity, because people find it's non-threatening, it's not too difficult to get. And the bricks are hardy and they last. So in an African environment where we needed to be in the classroom again tomorrow and not break, we're finding that it is lasting. So it's kind of answering all those tick boxes that we need to tick off in terms of a tool.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brent. That is really helpful. I thought it would have been great if you even could do a demo, if you had the bricks close to you. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but maybe we can try that in the other rounds of great. Just to show us how it works. And perhaps while you do that, you could also elaborate more on the specific skills that you said it helps to develop when it comes to maths.
No problem. I can do that in the next round with pleasure.
All right, great. So I'm going to now ask Dr. Junaid to come in. Whizz Education has won quite a number of awards. And I believe it's because you are doing something right. There's something that probably all these organizations saw in the work that you are doing. So Junaid, can you just share something about your model? I read about how Whizz Education started as Whizz Math, a group of parents, educators who were really passionate about having customized learning, interactive learning. And this is how the vision started. So could you probably tell us more about how you've been working to ignite interest of students in mathematics, and also what are the elements of your programming that help students to really have more interest in maths?
Sure. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So as you say, Whizz was founded almost 2 decades ago, and as a group of parents, teachers, educators, designers, technologists. And the thinking went as follows. The company was founded on a very simple belief that every child deserves a learning experience that caters to their individual needs and pace of learning. It sounds so simple, and yet it's antithetical to so much of how education is done, where students are pushed through a curriculum at a fixed pace. They're all taught in the same way. And unfortunately, that leaves many students, too many students, marginalized. We know that one of the most effective ways to counteract this is tutoring. It enjoys one of the highest effect sizes among all education interventions. There's research that goes back decades that testifies to the efficacy of tutoring. And this was, the early part of this century where there was a feeling that maybe the affordances of digital technology can help actually scale up some of those benefits of tutoring. And so we developed an online virtual tutoring platform. So this isn't a human being at the other end of Zoom. It's a fully automated online program. It uses clever algorithms to diagnose each student's learning needs and then automatically guide them through hundreds of interactive lessons. And each student then progresses at their own individual pace. And so we've seen over the years, much of our research is centered on how we've been able to replicate and indeed extend many of the proven benefits of tutoring. But there's one aspect that I really want to touch on, and it's not so much the AI or the algorithms, but it's actually the content itself. So much of what the other panelists have said, particularly what Chris was saying about the way that maths is misrepresented in school, that resonates with me quite deeply. I'm a mathematician by training myself. And so for many people, maths is just this sprawling mess of symbols that's very difficult to make sense of. And what people often fail to realize is that symbols are actually a very recent convention. It's just not the way maths was done through the centuries. And when you study maths, even at its highest levels of abstraction, it's an incredibly visual and interactive discipline. Maths is really just the science of patterns. And so we wanted to really kind of capture that vision and have that infused throughout our content. So it's quite common when students are engaging with the hundreds of lessons on Maths Whizz to not even realize that they're doing maths. I mean, they obviously know that there's mathematics in there, but it's such a novelty to experience maths and with the kinds of representations that we have, where the lessons are animated. There's real pedagogical intent behind them. So while much of it is designed for fluency, there's also an emphasis on trying to promote other strands of mathematical thinking, like reasoning and problem solving. And really it's intended to illuminate mathematics as a creative discipline, because mathematics is inherently creative. And so we've always envisioned maths to be that way. And as much as anything, it's about granting students agency. So not just having them sit passively and absorbing facts as golden truths that are not to be questioned, but actually having them interact with these concepts, having them model different mathematical ideas, having them work through different simulations, and actually having the opportunity to play with mathematics in a very meaningful sense. So that's very much the pedagogy that underpins our content and has driven much of our work.
Great, thanks so much, Junaid, for that. Probably if you could share more, some more light on how really do you achieve this customization that you are so passionate about? So if I was a child and I was using Whizz education software, how does it work a bit differently from other softwares? Because I think customization is always a challenge. That is why we don't have so many providers being able to provide customization to a certain extent. But how do you make it work in a way that is scalable?
So the customization exists on a number of levels. Part of this answer is dreary, and I'll just give it very briefly, and that's the algorithmic component, being able to precisely ascertain where each student is in terms of their knowledge levels across the curriculum, developing a learning journey from there, and then automatically guiding them through. That's largely an algorithmic challenge, but I think there's actually another interesting dimension of customization, and that's how you select representations that are appropriate to the local context. So we work in many different environments. We're based here in the UK, but we also have we've had major international projects in places like rural Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, low-income communities in Mexico, all over. And whenever we introduce our tutoring platform, we always undertake a localization exercise, which isn't just an exercise in translating the language. I mean, that's part of it, but it's actually scrutinizing the way in which different concepts have been represented, the different visuals and animations that have been used, and making sure that they're actually culturally appropriate and that the reference points that we use are actually sensitive to each environment. And that's a very thorough process.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say that that's a process we have to go through, because it's the only way that a platform like ours could ever be implemented at scale, is to undergo that scrutiny and to have that seal of approval that it really is sensitive to local needs.
Exactly. Thanks so much, Junaid, for that. And if I could go back to Dr. Chris, it was really interesting when you really talked to us about the concept of families being involved and to really promote math education. So now I really would love your perspective on what do you think are really those essential aspects that we need to consider. Now you've talked to us about what the family needs to do. If we want to look at this in the policy space, how do we get families involved in their children's education? It doesn't necessarily mean policy at the national level, but really even school policy or something that we can do that helps parents to really feel like this is something that is part of the education system and something that they need to do. And in addition to that, probably you could talk about some good experiences you've had, if you have any data on families, how they've been really helpful, and we've got some good results from parents being involved in their children's education.
Well, you ask a hard question. So, and we are a very young organization. So I'm sorry to say we don't have some lovely stories to tell you about how it has worked for families out in the field. Or I wish I had that information, and we're trying to run studies to get that for you. In terms of policy, it's crucial to get connections to the families. And I think reading literacy groups have fought that battle in terms of how do you get families engaged in reading and helping them to know what to do and how to do it, most of which, at least to start with, is just to read with their child. And so we're hoping to piggyback off of or work with those reading literacy programs to take advantage of what they've already done and not recreate it or do our own version of it, but work with them. And that also goes with preschools or early education areas, healthcare providers. In the US, there's Reach Out and Read, which uses pediatricians to connect to families. It's going to take organizations that work with the families directly. It can't just be a policy handed down and something saying, do this wonderful thing for your children, because that just isn't going to work. There needs to be a sense of community, a sense of these other families are doing it with us. This teacher is doing it with us. This doctor is doing it with us. This health clinic is doing it with us. That's the sort of thing that's essential to make something like this work. And I don't have those answers. So that's part of what we're hoping to develop or work with people who have developed.
Exactly. No, thanks so much, Chris. You make a great point around the fact that it's not something that we can just pass down through policy. It has to have that kind of participative approach where people feel that they really need to do this as part of their duty to their children. Now, I would like to ask Christine to come in because we are talking about community-based learning here. And Christine, you have been doing something very interesting with the African Maths Initiative, and you are really focused on community-based math education. So could you kind of explain more of what this initiative is doing and how you try to achieve community-based math education? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Laetitia, and I'm part of the African Maths Initiative. Now, African Maths Initiative is a non-governmental organization based in Kenya, and it looks to address mainly two concerns besides others: access to and the quality of mathematics education in Africa. Now, in Kenya and Africa in general, learning is theory-based. Math is perceived to be a hard subject, and the students are mostly exposed to calculations and formulas only. Now, the direct consequences of this is that the learners develop a negative attitude towards the subject, and therefore they do not pursue it in, a university or other higher learning institutions. So what has African Maths Initiative, or AMI, done about this? We've come up with a number of initiatives. I'm just going to highlight three particular sessions which would be very interesting for this symposium. One is math camps, and then math clubs, and eventually I'll talk about Soma Nyumbani. So math camps are a week-long residential camp program for high school students, where they get exposed to interesting and relevant mathematics topics, which they would otherwise never encounter them in the typical high school math curriculum. The camps take place during the school holidays, and the usual practice is to take these students, to bring these students to a university environment. Now, during the camp, about 40 to 60 kids get to interact with volunteer lecturers, researchers, teachers, educators, postgraduate and undergraduate students who facilitate the sessions. The camp has to be a little bit different from what they get from school. So they are very interactive, they're immersive, and the sessions provide our students an opportunity to, enjoy mathematics, to practice, to do typical, application of mathematics, and also they get to interact with technology that applies mathematical concepts. Now, the other one important aspect of the math camp is that they are all inclusive. They attract everyone, but especially those who find it hard to learn maths, and also who are the struggling students. Now, the math camp started in 2010, and over those years we've run like 30 math camps across Africa. Now, math clubs are just a smaller version of the math camps. So participants of the math camp take part in the 1 week immersive session, but then what next? So ideally they go back to the high schools and install math clubs. Now, what we do is we support these math clubs with resource packs, and these resource parks help the clubs to run efficiently and also become sustainable on their own. Now, COVID happened. So ideally, math clubs and math camps are physical sessions. So what happens? Does learning stop? No. We started a Soma Nyumbani program, and Soma Nyumbani is a Swahili name for learning at home. We developed learning resources which could be picked by a teacher, a family, or a guardian, and they would use these materials to guide learners or to guide their students in practical learnings at home. They would typically take these sessions, so the sessions were put in an app and also on a website. They can both be accessed by the name Soma Nyumbani, and all of them are interactive, immersive, and they can be used by anyone who would like to facilitate an interactive session. So 30 maths camps so far, they have been extremely successful, and we've been able to carry them over to 9 other African countries. So now, at least once per year, we run annual math camp in Ethiopia, Tanzania, Ghana, Cameroon, and recently Togo and Benin. So what makes them unique? These sessions are, they get to get things like geometry, combinatorics, and these are building on very simple mathematical concepts. So it's all about mathematical literacy. Where can I use counting? Okay. As a conclusion, I just want to say, I think we live in a time where learning methods have always been dysfunctional, especially in Africa. And it's an opportunity for everyone to reimagine how math is taught within communities, especially in Africa. Thank you.
Exactly. Thanks so much. Yeah, and you really paint a great picture of trying to look at the context in Africa and coming up with these initiatives that try to look at how to still make math education work for disadvantaged communities in under-resourced contexts, as we say. Yeah. Thank you so much, Christine, for that. So Brent, I wanted to come to you and ask, we know that play is good for children. In your case, you are really putting this to work. You are really kind of putting this to practice. So you talked about how you are going to show us how the 6, did I just forget the name of the terminology?
6 bricks.
6 bricks works. And great. Please go ahead and probably as you do it, we'll also get to understand why play is so important in teaching math.
Thank you. This is a manipulative, and there are plenty of good math manipulatives out there in the world. And Lego as a product is not one of the cheapest products. And people would be wondering, why would we use 6 Lego bricks? The reality is that we're working with the Lego Foundation. And so we don't sell these bricks. These bricks are donated to all the children that don't have access to these type of tools. And so all the work that we're doing in South Africa and around the world with the Lego Foundation is based on a donation. So we donate these sets of 6 bricks. So it costs them absolutely nothing. There's no cost for the curriculum, and it's nice and cheap. So all of this is only possible because of the Lego Foundation. I wanted to go to what Junaid said about agency, giving children agency. So for an instance, Mike said, if you just have a look at this here, if you give me a number right now between 10 and 30, give me any number between 10 and 30.
10 and 50, I'll say 11.
Okay, so what we would do now is a simple exercise, and this is what Chris was talking about earlier. Instead of them writing this down or having a maths equation, the children might say, well, I need to be able to see 11 of these studs. So these little dots on top of the brick are called studs. What I need to be able to do is put all the bricks together in such a way that when I'm finished, if I look at it from the top, all I can see is 11 studs. So I have to keep working and keep trying. And so I've got to try and work out how many studs I can see. So when I look at it from the top, how many studs can I see? And if that's not 11, can I change it and can I manipulate it? And what's happening about play? This is play, but it's mathematics in action, because what's happening is the child is looking at this. If it's wrong, instead of somebody telling them that it's wrong, they are actually learning that failure is part of a very important process in terms of being able to be successful. And breaking down is a critical component to learning. I need to deconstruct if I want to learn. So breaking down and then reattaching is very important. So this is a very simple example of how playful activity can help you with something as simple as mathematics. And just a number concept like 11. What's interesting about 6 bricks is you might think, wow, is that not limiting for children? Surely we can give them better manipulatives. Well, with just 6 bricks, I have over 915 million different ways to connect these 6 bricks. So we're not limiting these children in any way. This manipulative is incredibly powerful. It's simple, but massively powerful. And play is an incredibly powerful tool to help us drive the learning process. So play helps us develop all the skills that we need in a much less formalized schooling system that many people are seen as problematic around the world today.
Thanks so much, Brent. This has been a great demo of 6 bricks. Now, I think when we think about 6 bricks, we have something in mind in terms of how it works. It's so simple, requires very little resource, and yet so powerful in terms of teaching children numeracy skills. That is great, and we really appreciate that, Brent. I'm going to now go to Junaid, just to really kind of build on what we've been discussing. Junaid, can you share some perspective on how you believe math helps to foster creativity? And I hear there's something called mathematical identity. Could you also kind of talk more about that?
Oh, there's a lot there. So firstly, I'll just have to say I love that demo. I'll be trying that out with my daughter. Maths is inherently creative. We can lose sight of that because of the way it's often represented or misrepresented in formal education. But let's think about what creativity actually is. I mean, it goes by many definitions, but we're talking about being able to apply what you know in novel ways, connecting different pieces of information in ways that yield unexpected results. And mathematics as a discipline just lends itself to that. Maths is full of many surprising truths and many interesting ideas. And as I said earlier, it really is just a scientific study of patterns. There's another element to creativity too that I just want to touch on, and that's breaking rules. So often we see maths as a subject that infuses students with fixed rules. But creativity is often about breaking out of those conventions and tinkering with the rules and seeing where that might lead you to. And so much of the mathematics that we take for granted today, from the number system to the way that smartphones work, so much of it relies on mathematics that was just considered bizarre and unusual when it was first encountered. And I think it's important that we give students the opportunity to experience mathematics in those ways. As a very simple example, when I go to sleep at night, I usually go to sleep at 10 or let's say 11 o'clock on most nights, wake up at 7 o'clock. So it's an 8-hour interrupted sleep. In that system, 11 plus 8 equals 7. That's modular arithmetic. We use it every day to monitor time. And yet we never impress on students that numbers can be combined in that way. We tell them that when you add numbers, they have to get larger, and that's simply not true. I think much of this is also about connecting maths to other disciplines that are more typically associated with creativity, so art. There are wonderful intersections between maths and art. I was just teaching my students about fractals the other day, very simple rules that give rise to phenomenally complex and interesting patterns. But as much as anything, I think it's about having a temperament that allows you to express yourself creatively. So in maths, the speed is often the currency of success. You're told that the faster you are, the smarter you are. It's just not true. Some of the best mathematicians I know are actually very slow, very methodical. They take their time. They know that patience is the real currency of success in the subject. And they know that as well as being able to answer questions that are given to them, mathematics is as much about exploring and coming up with interesting questions in the first place. So really fostering that inquisitiveness. And then in terms of having a mathematical identity, it really is about rejecting some of the straitjackets that we usually apply. and just understanding that firstly, it's an incredibly diverse subject, far more diverse than it's often presented as. And I think part of that diversity is embracing the fact that mathematics is full of challenging ideas and concepts, and that it's okay to occasionally venture down a blind alley or make a mistake or try your hand at something and fail, as I think Brett was saying earlier. And so just recognizing that we need to move away from these very binary conceptions of maths as being simply about right or wrong answers and getting to the right answer as quickly as possible. To me, a mathematical identity is just having that willingness to explore, the freedom to take risks, and just knowing that you in the end are the agent of your own learning.
Wow, thanks so much, Junaid. You really kind of helped us to understand it in very simple terms and in yet quite a short time. That is very, very helpful. And I would like to ask if, Chris, would you want to add something to this in terms of how maths helps children to develop creativity and the identity part as well?
I think we've all been emphasizing the importance of play and seeing math as a playful thing. And I just completely agree with all the points that Junaid was making. Math is so often incorrectly presented as this dry, calculating thing, and it's so playful, it's so exploratory, and to get families to introduce that to the children and get schools to emphasize that in terms of doing things like rich learning tasks, which people are starting to try to introduce more, at least in the US, to elementary schools. Seeing the possibilities of play and exploration is going to seed that feeling of creativity, the chance to try things and to fail and to accept failure and then the excitement of success. I mean, solving puzzles, rather than seeing math as a sequence of problems, seeing it as a bunch of adventures where you're trying different puzzles, puts such a different emphasis on the whole field.
Thanks so much, Chris. That is very, very helpful and interesting as well. I think the time in this panel is not enough to kind of digest all the information we have. I think Tony and the team will help us in terms of the report so we can try to really see how we unpack this. For me, in terms of the work I do, I'm always thinking about policy. How do we take some of these brilliant ideas and take them to policy so that we're able to see it really make that large impact? But then, Christine, I'm going to give you the last word here, and I will ask you to help us understand why you think a community-based approach is the best way, or is a great way to kind of help children in underserved contexts to learn math.
Okay, thank you. I think that is a very interesting question. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is kids are able to learn from where they are and in their context. Now, how is that useful? The math camps are, or for example, the community-based learning approaches, and give an example of the math camps, you know, they're able to interact or apply the mathematics and science topics within their own context. So let me give you a typical example. We developed virtual math camp cards, and this is an example. And these cards, they're typical 54 math camp cards, but we innovated them such that each of the 4 suits has a specific theme. So they're games, puzzles, themes, or mathematical facts. A student will just typically take this, and we'll give each of them a packet. Now this is a puzzle. They can solve it among themselves. The student can share it with their family. I'm stuck, can you help me? If he solves this very well, they get excited. They go and share it with their friend in school. They can share it with the teacher, and most likely the teacher is wondering, like in Kenya, I think cards are sort of stigmatized, but how comes a card has a puzzle? No, this is something interesting that they can look at and share amongst themselves. So I think community-based learning approaches changes the dynamics of learning. It helps learners engage in authentic learning experiences. The other additional point is community partners, for example, schools, universities, community-based organizations are able to give back to their community through supporting education and students. These community partners not only just live there as symbols, but they also participate in the learning and even follow up on the students who take part in the math camps. And the last bit is, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, Christine, sorry.
Okay, the last thing is, I think, and this is the approach African Maths has taken up, learning dynamics have changed. This is a low resource context. Are you going to still teach using the same methods? They no longer work. Yet the 21st century period requires a different set of thinking. You have to think logically. You have to incorporate different aspects, sort of multidisciplinary approach. Now, community-based learning will help students adopt to these methods. They will learn 21st century skills through simple sets of games, puzzles, immersive learning. And I think this is beneficial for everyone, not only the learners, teachers, family, organizations, the whole learning ecosystem benefits. And at the end of the day, that's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly. Oh, thanks so much. You summed it up perfectly, Christine. And now we'll also really like to hear from you, our audience. You've been listening, and I believe you may have come up with some questions. We have a little time left, but if you have some questions, and you can just use the raise hand button. We'll have to give you the floor, and you can share them with us. But as we are looking at the list of participants to see if there are any questions, I will also ask our panel to just also think about in terms of a way forward. So now we want to look at this from moving away from this discussion and really seeing some actions that can be taken. What are the ways you see us moving from talking about some of these key issues to really seeing them really materialized and seeing them create the impact that we want to see. I will start with Junaid.
Yeah, so we have to face facts. We're living in an age where calculation no longer paves a guaranteed path to employment or prosperity. The original computers were humans whose job it was to carry out reams of calculations and to check that they were accurate. But that is redundant now. And yet, when you look at the mathematics curriculum in its current form, it's the way it always has been, really. It's so heavily focused on routine procedures and what can largely be characterized as computation, the very skills that are primed for automation. And so I think we have to, from a policy perspective, we just have to be brave and courageous in recognizing that our maths curriculum probably isn't fit for purpose. And at the very least, we need to re-examine some of its governing principles and ask, what kind of mathematics will students need in the 21st century? If it's not calculation, what else could it be? And the answers are out there. Mathematicians, maths enthusiasts, many maths educators that I speak to, they're well aware that there's an entirely different brand of mathematics, some of which we've been exposed to today, that is so much richer, so much more exploratory, so much more open-ended, and that elicits precisely the kind of thinking that machines will find very difficult to replicate. And that tells us that it's something that we should be focusing on. If we want maths to empower our students today and in the future, we need to move away from this heavy emphasis on computation.
Great. Thanks so much. Brent, what do you think?
I'm just going to talk more on the practical side. I'm going to say that, to get these ideas to change a country, to change a system is not easy. And the only way that we're finding, making some inroads is to try and institutionalize it. So you have to start, you've got to work with the government. Obviously, you've got to work with the Department of Education. And if you can, you've got to try and get them to buy into the program and adopt that program and to create a national rollout. But you've also got to work with the universities. I mean, the future of teaching is the next lot of teachers that are going to be prepared. And so you've got to take it to the universities preparing the teachers of the future. And we have to start working with those teachers and start changing the way they think about mathematics and learning mathematics and all subject content. And I think if we can do that, so if we can get them to then feed into an education system that's bought into a new idea, a new way of thinking, perhaps over time we can change it. But it's a very tough task, and it's amazing to see the incredible initiatives that all of my fellow presenters today are doing and everything that people are doing around the world. It's great. And I think that with these type of movements and the type of effort that people are putting in, we hopefully will see a change in the future. It's been very slow up to now. I agree with everybody, and it's not helping us. And I really hope that the change is faster and helps us in the future. Great.
Thanks so much for that, Brent. And Christine, could you share any thoughts about the way forward?
I think learning requires an ecosystem. It doesn't have one perfect best fit solution. And what just Brent has said, what if all these different partners combine, either combine ideas or learn from each other? So I think, for example, the Symposium communities are, it's a way forward. People sharing ideas, learning from what others are doing, implementing them, trial and error, and improving on it. So moving forward, I think learning communities are important. Synthesizing implementation ideas, feedback, again, implementation, I think that is also useful. And again, you can't leave behind implementers, researchers, experimenters, all of them are part of the system. Learners are also part of the system. How do we incorporate their feedback, the teachers, the parents? Everyone wants to be part of it, but if you exclude one party and only reach out to another, then it's no longer beneficial.
Certainly. Thanks so much for that, Christine. And finally, to Chris.
Well, thank you. I'll speak to the part that I care about the most, which is the first 5 or 6 years. And that's been almost ignored by governments and agencies. And I think that has to change. In the US, you'll hear public service announcements saying you should read with your child, but you never hear you should do math with your child. That needs the support that Christine was just talking about and Junaid was just talking about. There needs to be emphasis that those years are crucial and shouldn't, and that organizations need to be supporting education during that time. And the people who are going to be doing that education are the families. You're not going to have teachers of 2-year-olds. It's the families and the environment that they create that are going to be crucial to helping children have a good start to their math and reading lives, and everything else, of course, health and all the other things that go with a good upbringing. So I would say that government and emphasis from lots of education organizations are going to be crucial to changing that.
Thanks so much. I think our panelists have done justice to really the issues that we need to begin to focus on when trying to solve the problems in maths education, in especially underserved context, but also even in developed countries as well. With that said, I would like to thank you so much, our panel, Chris, Brent, Christine, and Junaid. It's been great having you for this discussion. And also to our audience, I believe we've all learned a thing or two from this discussion that we can take forward and really incorporate into the work that we are doing. Finally, thank you to mEducation Alliance for bringing us together to have this very important conversation. And we look forward to the outcome and being able to see some of these things we've talked about materialized. Thank you so much, and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.